As you were thinking about what we experienced last week, what comes to mind? What kind of experiences did you go through? What kind of takeaways do you have from the giving game? What happened last week in terms of your experience? Yes, please.
There's like lots of factors that I wouldn't even consider when it comes to like donating my money. And I think that I'm actually quite biased. I think I have a very strong opinion and I was like putting it on my teammates. But I think the fact that they were giving their opinions kind of helped me see things from a different perspective.
That's good. Do you mind sharing with others what went on in the team? Because you really had like an intense debate, right?
At the beginning of the talk, I kind of made a joke and I was like, if anyone like invests, like wants to donate in this, like to this AI thing, like we just can't be friends. Like we just really don't see eye to eye. And then someone put that they wanted to like donate to the AI thing. And I was like, can you explain your thinking? And then after like a couple of minutes of explaining, I was like, okay, because I was very much like, why wouldn't you save it like a human life right now? Like I'm really passionate about this. And I think a lot of our group, I think we're passionate too.
Yeah.
But he was very strong on the whole, no, this is like, I want to do this and this is why. And it was just interesting to see his perspective.
Yeah.
Because had he not voiced out his opinion, I would have been like, no way in hell will I ever donate.
Yeah, so that's a very humbling experience, right? Going through, you see some charities, but then you think to yourself, like, who would ever invest in this? And then going through the debate with somebody else who really believes very strongly in this, and then coming to the view that first we need a diversity of opinions. It's okay for other people to prefer other things. We don't want to force our opinions upon them. And then maybe we can learn something from them. And perhaps he could have learned something from your very strong stance. But I think in general, my personal view is that I try to take everything with humility because I am very aware of my own bias. So even when I have a very strong opinion, and I definitely do on several topics, I try to be open to other people coming with their own experiences, with their own perhaps biases or from their own view of the world. So our biases might meet halfway. And the more that we have, the more that we crowdsource this kind of process, the more that we can get to some interesting insights. And hopefully altogether, we'll kind of take out some of the biases. Doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's like groupthink, all sorts of, sometimes the group makes things more extreme, but I did not notice this when you debated stuff. It seemed very open. It's great that you were open to, even after your very strong statement, like, I don't want to be friends with somebody who endorses that. You were able to have like a calm, at the end, I think a calm conversation and maybe even come to contemplate that. Thanks for sharing that. Great. That's kind of like some of the things that I was hoping about you gaining from this experience. Any questions that you have about the giving game that seem very obvious, given that we did giving games about effectiveness? Like, what kind of questions would you want to ask about the giving game itself? What kind of ways can we think about this to improve or do things better? Or what is it that's important about the giving game?
I want to suggest a better question because when we're discussing, we're trying to look up more information, but you told us not.
That too.
So the purpose of this session is just to see how biased we are, or what kind of heuristics we use when we're choosing different charities.
Yeah, I don't know about, so it's not a measure of bias so much as like comparing our gut intuition based on zero information. And then the power of debate, the power of sharing information with others, so based on what it is that they know, just based on kind of a discussion, and then trying to go through a process of quantifying things, identifying factors, considering every possible factor, and then bringing this into the equation where everybody can, so we had a monitor that helps facilitate and make sure that everybody is included. We had an observer that kind of tried to document everything. So just like see what the process is that the group go through from gut intuition to the end. It was interesting to see how many people changed their minds. Not many. I think like a 1 hour is not enough. But in relation to that question, it's exactly what I was looking for. The main question you might want to ask, what is the purpose of this? Why are you forcing us to go through this So you might want to ask this like before I run this rather than after, right? So it's always good to ask me, what's the point of this lecture? Like, why would I want to be here? Which is related to, is this really effective? Is taking this course effective? How is this effective? Is this going to help me with my career? Is this going to help me with my understanding of the world? How do you know that this is effective? Did you measure this? And did you compare this to something else? Because I could have spent the time that I was here in a giving game doing something else. Perhaps hiking in Hong Kong is much better for me to understand the world. Could very well be. So I really care about the effectiveness of your time. And I want to make sure that what we're doing here is effective. Therefore, I use a lot of things that I hope have been tested rigorously. So for example, in this case, the giving game is actually a charity that cares about effectiveness. They measure effectiveness. And one of the nice tricks about giving game is that they can measure their effectiveness just like we did Give Directly against 6 others. This Giving What We Can and the giving games is actually compared against Give Directly. How do we know that the giving game that you just did last week is as good as Give Directly? How do we know this? What's the trick that they did here in the giving game to make sure that we're as effective as Give Directly? And it's always a good trick to have because that way you can always ensure your effectiveness, right? Think what they did. They took $10 that people gave it to them so that they can give this to an effective charity. Their benchmark is Give Directly. So at the very minimum, Give Directly is already an effective charity. But what they did is to incorporate some kind of a process by giving it to you, giving it to somebody else, to contemplate what effectiveness is, to choose between charities that are as good as Give Directly, if not higher than that, right? So that way we know, if all of you just gave to Give Directly, we already were as good as Give Directly. Many of you chose things that are much more effective than Give Directly. So the same kind of money both went to better than Give Directly and trained you in something very important so that in your future decisions, you can be more effective. You've learned something about the process. This is a very neat trick, right? So by giving other people money in order for them to make charitable decisions, they can ensure that that money is used as effectively as Give Directly, if not more, while adding something more in the process. Now, the question is, how do we know what this one additional thing is? How do we know what the process is that you went through? So we measure these things. So that's why we had 2 columns. We had the gut reaction, and then we had the final decision. And then we compare, did you move from the initial decision to the final decision in what we would consider or measure as more effective or not? So this is what they do. So finally, I take your report and I send this to Giving What We Can, and they quantify this. They really care about effectiveness. It's not just a game that you just did and then we throw it away and we don't care about this. We care about data. We care about quantifying, and we care about making sure that what we're doing is effective. So I'll just show you what this looks like. So just keep in mind that lower score is better because it's ranked. So number 1 rank is the highest, and I don't know, number 10 or number 20 in terms of factors is the lowest. So the lower that you are, the higher you are in the ranking. So here's what you can see about all sorts of impact matrix. So for example, consideration for giving supported by evidence, having a high positive impact per dollar donated, tackling one of the world's most critical problems. So they look at the different charities that you were choosing from. They have different measures for how impactful they are, how effective per dollar spent, and all of that. And then they want to see whether from your gut reaction, at the end, for those who shifted, moved into the more effective ones on different matrix. And you can see the differences. So what you can see in general, I think they had, 421 giving games. So after 421 giving games, what they showed is that there was a change. So on the important things regarding effectiveness, people went to the lower part, so higher rank for the matrix that really count about effectiveness, and lower in the rankings about all sorts of things that shouldn't matter as much. So for example, in-group bias, helping my community, but not helping all these other people that might benefit more from that. So this is how a charity, by giving what we can, with something as simple as a giving game, can measure their effectiveness, right? So across different things in this course, perhaps you're not noticing it, perhaps I'm doing this indirectly, but I do try and measure our effectiveness in order to make sure that you're going through some kind of a process, right? If you're not sure what is the effectiveness of a certain lecture or a certain project, ask me, and I will be happy to share with you first what my thoughts are and then how I'm going to evaluate this, right? So every year, every semester, every task that I do, I really try and think about what is the giveaway for this? How am I more effective than hiking in Hong Kong or you spending this on another course, okay? All right. If you want to see this is from 2020. If you want to see the detailed report, it's very exhaustive. It's like it keeps on going with all sorts of different measures and how they do this and other things. I just want to let you know that we've pushed the boundaries of giving game a lot more than usual, because usually people do play pumps. They do give directly and they do against Malaria Foundation, but we did like 7 of these. I was a little bit worried that maybe I'm going to overwhelm you, because last year we only did 3 charities. So one session did these 3 charities and the other session did this. But I thought maybe you'll be able to tackle 7 of those. I know it was maybe a little bit overwhelming, but I think you handled this quite well. So every time we push the boundaries a little bit, then I share this with Luke Freeman and I tell him, this is what we've done. These are the reports. Think about implementing Giving Game 2.0 based on what we did here at HKU. So you're kind of like the pretest for perhaps what will come later on. Today I want to talk about the psychology of altruism. A lot of things for us to discuss. Maybe you've already felt this with 7 charities, but picking a charity is a very complicated thing. So if you go to a charity comparison website, charity evaluator, assessment, you'll see there are lots of charities out there, 1.5 million charities, how to choose between those, right? So I gave you a list of 7 charities, the ones that I saw the most, some of the most effective from different domains in GiveWell or Founders Pledge or Open Philanthropy. But if you are a layperson and you are faced with 1.5 million, what do you end up doing? What eventually happens when you open this kind of websites? You see 1.5 million charities. Who do you donate to? Maybe you don't donate because it's just overwhelming. You're just like, I really wanted to donate this 500 Hong Kong dollars, you know, found it on the street. Now it's time for me to give it away. I don't know. But then 1.5, come on, people. I don't have time. I have to do homework for Psych 3052. So forget the donation. I'm going to pass on this. So sometimes when you have too much choice, it's really a burden. You don't know what to do, right? So the question is, we want to try and understand when people are faced with the decisions, once they've decided they wanted to do altruism, how do they make sense of this 1.5 million charities? And it just keeps on going. And I think what most people don't realize, and when they start to contemplate this, it becomes really overwhelming, is that when you spend that $500 on one charity, there's all these other charities, the 1.5 million charities that you did not donate to. And there is an opportunity cost, because it could have been that you've donated to the wrong charity. And with the same kind of money, you could have saved more lives, done more good. And it's a bit of a burden. I don't think most people think about this, but I spend a lot of time thinking about this. And there's a big debate in effective altruism. We don't want people to feel guilt, shame, regret, feeling the burden of, oh, but I could be doing more with my time, more with my money. Am I eating too much? Am I spending too much money on, I don't know, clothing, transport, whatever? We don't want people to walk around with this feeling of burden. We just want to help them do a better decision based on the time that they have, the resources that they have, and their own personal preferences and fit. So the question is what to do with this opportunity cost. How can we lift the burden off of people in order to help them make the decision between the 1.5 million? So I think some core insights that you've had in your readings, some of you, so different readings were about different things. I hope that you try to diversify this within your group, within your team, to try and get people to read different things. But I think what's most important is this contrast between these two. So most people estimate the best charities are 1.5 or 2 times more than the other charities. So they're saying, okay, 1.5 million, it doesn't really matter because all of them are the same. There is no opportunity cost. If I go with this charity, then it's just as good as the other charity. Maybe, half, maybe I could have done 2 times more good in the world. But actually what comes into play, and I'll show you some evidence based on randomized control trial and one Nobel Prize winning work, is that best charities could be 10 times, 100 times, sometimes even 1,000 times more effective than some of the other charities. So I want us to try and think about that, to try and visit our assumptions about the world together. Another very interesting thing that we'll come back to later is that very few people do research, any kind of research about the charities that they give to. So only a third do research, and the kind of research that they do is very, very interesting. Yeah, so we'll talk about that. Only 3% of that is really measured by effectiveness or performance. Okay. Okay. Why is this important? I'll try and make this a little bit bigger. I don't know how much you can see here. But some people say it's not that important that people make good decisions because there's just not a lot of charity money. But actually, there's quite a lot of charity money coming from you or your families or your communities. If you look at this, individual donations in 2008 were about $229 billion, whereas corporate giving, for example, we really should get the corporations to do a little bit more good. I don't know why they're so low on this. Only $15 billion compared to that. And then some people say, yeah, of course, individuals give a lot. Who gives a lot? Warren Buffett, Bill Melinda Gates. These are the people who give a lot. So that's why we have these ones here. So you can see here that the wealthiest, like Bill and Warren Buffett, give 115 out of the 229. So they do give a lot. I feel like they're not giving enough, and there's lots of billionaires that could do a lot better in terms of their giving. We should hold them accountable for that. But a large proportion of that also comes from us. So 57 is already more than both foundation, charitable, banquets, corporate givings, and bequests, and corporate giving, and all of that. So there is a big chunk of money that we can do more good in. So 57 billion annually is a big chunk of money. We can save a lot of lives with this if we can only make this a little bit more effective, right? Yeah. So it's important to look at the statistics in order to understand, does this matter? And what I want to say to you is that it does matter. So for us to understand the psychology of altruism, for us to run the first project to identify what are the cognitive kind of biases that people have, why people prefer this over that, can help affect 57 million annually, and hopefully also the rich together with that, with the individual ones, and maybe even the corporations if they keep track of things. So some interesting statistics on that. In terms of only a third do research, so you can see here the kind of like breakdown in 2009. This is the latest that I could find. And then in terms of how much time they spend on this, people don't have time. People are very busy. So a large proportion just spend up to 60 minutes, which is completely understandable. But when you think about if you really want to do more good, it's not just about the money that you give, but it's also about the time that you might want to spend in making sure that the money that you give is used effectively. So sometimes you can give less money if you just spend like 2 more hours making sure that it's not going to the wrong charity, or that there's another charity that you can give to that does a little bit better than that. And then, and this is really interesting, and the reason why effective altruism groups, charities really emphasize reports like this, is that when people make decisions like that, they don't have a lot of time. So many of them have like 15 minutes, 60 minutes. They need to make a lot of decisions. They don't read detailed reports. This is like the 15 minutes, maybe the same ones that are 2 to 6 hours. So detailed reports, only 15% The majority are based on facts and figures like this, very simplified, 1, 2, 3, fact, 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 figure, figure, figure. That's it. 15 minutes, I need to make a decision. I can't go through 1.5 million. I need to summarize this as fast as possible. Give me facts, give me figures. I don't want to do the homework. Which makes sense. A lot of them also base things on stories or personal testimonials. So that's understandable. Now, this is the most interesting. How do people do their research? What do people do when they research things? You can see what they do. They go on the organization's website. So let's say I want to make sure I want to donate to Red Cross or Saving a Child. Then I go on their websites and they're saying that they're doing some good. So maybe I should just donate to them. But are the charities really giving you the best information that you can? Maybe you need something more scientific. Maybe you need randomized control trials. Maybe you need a third-party assessment of what goes on in these charities. But many people just, they go to the webpage, their influence, whatever is over there. And this is how they make their decisions. What else? Perhaps you work for a charity. That's 14%. So you work for a charity, you donate to that charity, which is interesting. You have a friend or a family member, 14%, you benefit from it in some way, okay? Internet search, Google is already a little bit better because it means that people are looking for information that's not from the charity or not from their friends. What's the problem with Google searches? I see this when I have like a million ad blockers on my Chrome, but when I see what my parents are doing, it's just like horrifies me because the first like 2 pages is just like ads. Of donate to this, do that. That has nothing to do with real evidence. And it's very difficult for them to make sense of like what is real and what is evidence and what is not, what is an ad. And it's become very confusing. Google is like an expert in getting us to click on things that actually are not like the best things in there. So ad blockers, DuckDuckGo, whatever your thing is, like there's other things in order to avoid all the things. But this here in internet search, like Google, we need to take into consideration that does not necessarily mean that people will find the evidence that is required. Some websites, some presentation, maybe somebody saw a TED Talk, email spams that people get, like please donate to our charity. It's the first person that gets your attention when you open your email saying, please donate to this. This is very, very important. Or when you open your like Instagram, Snapchat or whatever, and you see, that person did that walk. Therefore, I'll donate to that. This is like the first thing. So not a lot of comparisons, right? So it's very interesting when we try as psychologists, as social psychologists, one of the things that we really care about is trying to understand how do people make decisions about this? This is how. That's not the most effective way. So we need to help people make a little bit of better decisions. And finally, what are the motivations for giving? A lot of these motivations are about, a friend or family went through cancer, so I want to donate to cancer. Autism, all sorts of other kind of things that relate to me that have a personal story, somebody that I know, just kind of like 38% of that. Fit with religious beliefs is kind of the one that dominates, 65%. So I'm Christian, I'll donate to my Christian community. I'm Jewish, I'll donate to this temple, Buddhist, Taoist, whatever. It's like, I'll just go with this. Maybe the God will also grant me some good grades or good luck in horse racing. Interesting things, just like map this out and see how people are like ranking this. So it's always good to think about those. So let's try and kind of reflect on ours. I'm going to ask you like 2 basic questions. I want you to try and estimate, just based on these kinds of solutions, try to measure, assess the effectiveness of these 4 solutions for 2 big problems. So the first problem is climate. So we have tons of CO2 avoided. Which one of those is better at getting us higher rates of tons of CO2 avoided? Is it live car free? Is it have 1 fewer child? Is it donate $1,000 to rainforest charity? Or is it reuse a plastic bag 1,000 times? As you're thinking about this, try and like make a comparison, like which one is like twice as high, 10 times as high, 100 times as high as the others. So make sure that your comparisons take into account also the proportions between those. So if, for example, I don't know, on one factor you choose 0 or 1, and the other one you choose 10, then the 10 is 10 times more than 1. Yeah. Okay, 0 to 100, I think we definitely have enough votes. Let's try and make sense of this. What does your gut intuition tell you about this? Which one seems to be like the most effective here? Which one is like the highest one? The top one that we should focus on? What does your gut intuition tell you? Sorry? Pure child. Yeah, can you say more? Like why?
I guess this is the
Yeah, so there's lots of things that we consume, a lot of pollution that we create throughout our lifetime, right? What would be a good way to quantify that? If we wanted to put a number behind it, what would we do? How would you quantify our pollution throughout the lifetime? I don't measure tons or anything like that, but like, how would you go about measuring this? Like, for example, let's say I'm a 25-year-old. How much pollution have I done up until now? Yeah, I just want to try and give a number because I want to understand how bad is it for a person, how much pollution. If I'm avoiding this person, I did not create this person versus having this person. So no person and there is a person. How much pollution have I contributed to in terms of CO emissions? How would I go about measuring it? What would be a good way to assess it? Any thoughts? Maybe help her? Yes, please.
maybe we can calculate the total amount of people carbon footprint in that one country, and then
Okay.
we calculate that and footprint per capita or something.
Right. Yeah. So we can look at the aggregates, and then we can see how many people are included in this aggregate, and then we can like divide it or something like that. Right? Is that what you meant?
And
Okay.
To add one point is that I think the having a fewer children is the least method to reduce the carbon footprint.
The list.
Yes.
The last one. Yeah.
Because I think that although we are human beings in this kind of time, we can produce lots of to air pollution, but we
Right.
can, if we can enhance the priority, those kind of people, if we generate children who with the higher generation the technology, then we can further reduce the emission.
Okay, that's terrific because I think I'll rephrase what you're trying to say. You were focusing on the cost, right? So each person has a cost, but it could be that a person can also reduce costs in some way. For example, I know you meant technology, but persons can create technology that would reduce carbon print. So on one side, we want to measure the cost per person, but on the other side, we wanted to see perhaps persons on average can reduce these costs, right? So these are two different factors. So at the beginning, we thought, okay, we just measure the costs, no problem. Now we understand there's a little bit more complexity in that. What's another complexity that we're overlooking with people? People can produce people. So it's not like just like this one person who is consumed, but this person might, on average, create more persons that will have more persons, right? So if we would want to quantify that, we look at first, we try to see, okay, on aggregate, all of you, please document what did you spend, electricity, food, transport, all of that. And then we can measure this. We can also look at the aggregate and divide this by the country. But then we also need to find a way to talk about the benefits that a person might bring in on average. How can we tackle this? And take into consideration that sometimes bringing another person might be exponential of persons involved in this and how many people are involved. Although the kind of the population of the world is stabilizing and might even come down at some point. Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that, both of you. So from last to first, what other factors seem to come? So when you said the last, which one for you is like the first one?
I think it is very hard to quantify because
How to quantify, yeah.
And I think the live car free would be the most effective compared with other.
Car free.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you go about measuring that?
We can help with the carbon emission or the electricity consumption.
Mm.
This is one of the
Yeah. So already a good point. You might want to ask which car. Is it that car, diesel? Is it like gas, or is it electric, or is it some other hydrogen? What kind of car? But just generally now we're talking like gas. And then unlike maybe with humans, car definitely only has costs to the environment. I have yet to see a car that adds to. So that's a little bit simpler to quantify, and we can start putting that into equations. So good. So car first, perhaps child free last. What was your last one? Yeah, why is that? Intuitively, there's something very, very weird about that category, right? Yeah, what doesn't speak to you there? Not effective, yeah.
Like, for example, $1,000 and more to the environment, like you're using a plastic bag.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing. Any other thoughts about this kind of comparison? Yeah. So let's just see what the estimate is. Yeah. Interesting. So like the top one having one fewer child, so it seems like pretty much in line with you, but pretty much on par with living car free. So it seems like here, at least there's a little bit of a consensus on how these two relate to one another. And then almost the same kind of impact, donate $1,000 to charity or reuse a plastic bag, 44 to 40. Maybe it's clear to you right now that this point, where was this? Yeah. So we had this point, you evaluated the different solutions as being this, right? So if you look at that, what we can see is like about 1.5 times, 2 times, just about right, the differences between those. But actually in reality, and I'm gonna show you, the differences are very, very big between those. So now that you know this, I'm gonna ask you another question and try to accommodate for that in the upcoming question. If we want to increase years of education for females in developing countries, what would be the best strategy to do that? So we have giving, so we have 100 is the highest efficacy and 0 is no efficacy at all. First one is free school uniform, conditional cash transfer for girls, deworming medicine for kids, and then merit scholarships for girls. And again, try and make this in a way that would allow us to compare charities also, you know, is it 2 times more, is it 10 times more, 100 times more, if we compare the different ones. Think about that. And a Nobel Prize in 2019 was given for this in economics. Okay, what are your thoughts? What comes like gut intuition that seems to be like the most impactful here?
For me, it was deworming medicine.
Deworming, why?
I'm assuming that, I'm not sure if they could like die from it, but I just thought hopefully they'd live long enough to be able to like go to school to just tackle the problem where their health is the most important, and then they have a future to actually be able to live. Yeah.
So first making it possible for them just to have a life so that they can participate, attend in schooling. Yeah. Is there another factor aside from that comes into play to make deworming the number one choice? What else could it be? What differentiates deworming from the other solutions here? Think about that. Any other factors that come into mind? Do you agree, disagree? What do you think about this? What is your intuition?
think the deworming one covers more people.
Covers more people. Why? How?
There are scholarships like for the good, like girls that don't want.
Right. It's a much larger population that you can cover with this. So more people will have access to this rather than. So obviously, merit scholarships are supposed to motivate everybody, but the beneficiary is actually a very small group of people, where deworming, there's a larger population. Very good. So number of people affected as well. Yeah. So first making sure that people survive, and then how many people are affected. Good. Any other thoughts about this? Yeah. All right. Let's see what you said. All right. So it seems like merit scholarship for girls got the highest grade, but this is like not a significant difference. It seems like you thought that this is something like 2 or 3 times more effective than free school uniforms, but probably on par. Conditional cash transfers, deworming medicine, or merit scholarship for girls are about the same efficacy. Just so we understand, why the free school uniform not seem effective to us? Why is that?
Uniform too.
Don't need the uniform to go to school. Why would people think that this is effective to some extent? Why did they get like 25? Why is it not 0?
Because I think I was the only one that put free school uniforms as well as like one of the highest, because
Oh, you did 100 there?
yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Interesting, yeah.
Just if you have a uniform, you have an identity, and no one really like looks past, or maybe like your background, how much money you have, and then you're all the same, and then you go to school doing the same thing, so you're not better or worse. So I think just having that uniform just shows that you're part of this community.
Yeah. So belonging, a sense of community, you feel like you're part of something, therefore it will make you feel more comfortable to go to attend and really persist with this for the long term, right? So deworming, perhaps you're healthy enough to go, but you're also healthy enough to do other things, right? Not necessarily to attend or participate. Whereas school uniform maybe gives you some kind of like a motivation, intrinsic motivation, that makes you feel like you're on par with everybody else and you can do stuff together. Very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing. So if we'll go and try to look at a little bit of the evidence. So which one works best? By the way, this is from last year. I just want to show you because it's very interesting. Yeah, it's practically the same. Yeah, maybe the numbers are a little bit different. It happens. Yeah, every time I see this, it's astonishing. Like last year, and like you have very similar guesses to last year's. I don't know what that's about, but interesting to see that. This is what they guessed. Here's the first figure that I want to give you from Founders Pledge. So Founders Pledge, like GiveWell, like Open Philanthropy, ranks things, does a lot of research to give you the top evidence based on randomized control trial. They put everything, they try to quantify everything. So when I ask you, can you quantify this? I'm going to show you how they quantified this. I'm not trying to harass you or anything. I really want us to try and think about how do we get these numbers. So let's look at this one. Which is the top one of tons of CO2 averted? So we have switch to green heating. We have avoid one transatlantic flight. I really should do better at this. I try to, but I fly too much, that's for sure. Buy green electricity, switch to an electric car, 1.52. Switch to hybrid car, plant-based diet, recycle. What's at the last here? Reuse. Yeah, so I guess your intuition was very much like this. So plastic bags, reusing 1,000 just doesn't seem to do much. We have a lot of emphasis on that. I don't know if you remember what happened with like Starbucks and plastic straws, but there was such a big campaign, so much money invested in that one thing. And then you want to ask yourself, is this really what we want to invest in? Like, I'm very grateful for HKU Starbucks for changing everything to just like be paper, but really is this like the biggest thing that we should invest in, where we have a bunch of other things. A lot of people, we do some research on this, switching to LED helps a little bit. I'm going to show you like a video that relates to that in a bit. What is missing here? What is not in this graph that we discussed? The child, yeah, where is it going to be? Zero? Yeah, so it's this one, 60. So it's like 30 times more than the biggest one here. What's this one with 100? That's the surprising thing, right? First time I saw this, my reaction was a little bit like your faces now. It's like, I want to have a look at this. So I really go and I look at the reports. I want to be convinced by evidence. So I want to show you an example of how they do this. So let's look at Founders Page, and you'll see that they have very, very detailed reports about every possibility, but I'm going to show you this one, which is their Excel. So every year they try and improve this Excel with a lot of calculations. So the graphs that I just showed you are from this Google sheet. And you'll see that they try to give you the sources for each information. So where they got this, and these are scientific articles. So they do the research for you, mostly based on systematic reviews, meta-analysis, top evidence that they could find. And then they categorize these in terms of tons of CO averted. So you can see the base one over here, and then you can see some of the more controversial ones like donate 1,000 to charity. And for each one of those, they have a complete description of everything with calculations, it just like keeps going. So I invite you, because they want to do better, to go and check this out. Don't take my word for it. But I want you to think about this kind of comparison. So it's interesting for you to test your intuitions. Like, how did they go from zero, my intuition or your intuition about leaving a one fewer child, to 60 here? So go look at their evidence, see where they get this from, and then see if it makes sense to you. Yeah, so this is one of the major reports. This is where they summarize this, and they have the entire a bunch of really interesting data published in 2020. I couldn't find the latest one, but there's more. How about these ones? So here is a list of all the randomized controlled trials about student participation in developing countries. And you can see very interesting countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Ghana, Cambodia, Colombia, Malawi, Morocco. What you can see here is the category. So for example, school travel time. Does decreasing the school travel time increase participation and attendance in school? What you can see is that the blue is what is the control condition, and the yellow is how much the intervention went beyond the control condition. And then whether this was, these are the confidence intervals, the error rate, and then whether this was significant in terms of the scientific quantification of that. So what you can see here is reducing school travel time really helps with that. So just making sure that people have schools close to them so that they can participate in this really seems to increase almost more than double in some places like Afghanistan. What else is there? So for example, cash transfers. You can see cash transfers mostly help on various places, especially here in Colombia. This is like a big increase in that, but not everywhere. Like in Malawi and in Morocco, Malawi is, I guess, the only one that really didn't go as high as expected, but it was kind of like in the right direction. Yeah. So this is an interesting intervention. So we have the citation for each one of those. What didn't work? Free school uniforms in some places. Here, actually, free school uniforms actually went down a little bit. So this is a significant decrease in attendance because of free school uniform. I don't know why. But you can see that the effect is nowhere as high as the ones that we're seeing here in terms of decreasing travel time. Free school meals, not as effective as the others. And another thing here about early commitment of financial aid. So every time we try to quantify these factors, we try to look at randomized controlled trials and see how much was increased. What is not taken into consideration in these figures? What don't we see here in the figures? We see how much is increased, whether this was successful or not. So we have a lot of successful things. Definitely cash transfers and accessibility of education works a lot. but we don't see the costs. So what you highlighted in terms of the availability, the access, how many people are impacted by this, what is the cost of deworming? Very, very cheap. So this is what led to the Nobel Prize in 2019. This is it. So the total cost per child per treatment is less than $50, which means that you can really get to billions, 1 billion treatments delivered to 280 million in various places around the world. And then you can see it influences everything. It doesn't just influence education. It influences person's ability to just live comfortably without all the annoyances of having worms. We don't think about this in Hong Kong. Having worms, occasionally, very rarely, we hear about this somewhere if you're a doctor, but this is a big problem in developing countries. And if we focus on education, it has a 25 reduction in being absent from school. But it's not just school, it's like across the board. So what you have is very low cost, very high impact, a lot of people, right? And affecting many, many domains. Yeah. So this is why has been recognized by GiveWell for many years. This is the 2022 report about this initiative being very impactful. And you can see how they calculated this. They have a lot of measures for this. This is the summary of the whole thing. And this summary takes into consideration cost, which is something that we don't think about, because scholarships and all the other solutions really cost a lot of money. Building more schools, getting more teachers. What is the cost of deworming? $50 per treatment. And you can do this on a mass scale. So that's why their summary is that deworming is 140 times more effective than the other solutions, right? If we look at where was this? Comparing reused plastic bag 1,000 times to donate 1,000, if you really agree with this and you see the evidence is solid enough for you, you can see how much more times. So donating to the wrong charity or giving your money to the wrong campaign can really decrease your impact. You can be 1,000 times, 10,000 times more effective just by changing what it is that you donate to. Okay? So yeah, very, very good job done on this, Nobel Prize winning and all of that, done really well. I think we'll take a break. We'll do a 5-minute break, come back, and then we'll discuss a little bit more of altruism. 5 minutes. Yeah, I have a little bit of a shift, but also about effectiveness. So we talked about charities, but now I want to talk a little bit about career. Do you ask yourself sometimes whether the person is doing the most effective career that they can? Have you ever thought about this? Do you have some ideas of who might be or not be effective in their careers? What's an effective career? Who does very effective jobs?
I don't think there's an effective career, but I think it's effective for the individual if they do a job that they love, because there's no point in, let's say, being a banker if you hate it, because you're actually going to decrease productivity. Taking up that job of someone that is dying to be a banker. Yeah, but you're thinking of effectiveness for that person, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So good clarification. We have two types of effectiveness. First, for the person, definitely for the person, not very effective if you go to a job that you hate every day. So let's say you just went to become a banker because you thought, okay, I'm just gonna love the money. I don't care whether I love the job. You're not going to survive very long, right? It's going to be a little bit depressing for you. So definitely that's a big factor. How about effectiveness for society or for the world or for doing good? How do we measure effectiveness over there? What kind of jobs do we have that kind of have high effectiveness? Doctors? Yeah. Like what? Can you say more? Yeah, a little bit more. Like what? What do they do?
Oh, they save lives.
Save lives?
Cure disease.
Yeah. So how would you go about thinking about their effectiveness? How would you compare this to some other professions?
number of lives saved, like well-being increase for number of people.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely medical doctors have a lot of influence in doing good in the world. Different types of doctors, they do different things, different kind of impact. Definitely one of the most impactful ones. I get a lot of inspiration from my little sister, who's a medical doctor, and I learn a lot from her. And it's interesting, it's inspiring to hear the stories of medical doctors. I don't know how long, if you've ever had the chance to kind of hear from a medical doctor about their experiences, but especially during the pandemic, they went through a lot. I think in Hong Kong it was relatively calm, but in the Western world, doctors went through some interesting conflicts. Good. So doctors, anything else comes to mind? Have you ever? Yeah, please.
Cooks, chefs, and janitors.
Oh yeah, do share. What's on your mind?
I'll start with janitors.
Janitor.
I live in residential hall, and sometimes we have a public holiday and janitors wouldn't be there, and the whole floor is just drowning in sand.
Yeah, the things we take for granted, right?
Yeah. So I think they're very, very important.
Yeah. What happens when I don't know, you go on a date or you meet somebody and they say that they're a janitor? What do we think about them? Not very highly, right? Especially compared to doctors, right? We don't evaluate them very highly, but it does seem like they do some good. They take care of things that we all need, and we only notice them when they're gone, right? Which is a shame. We really take them for granted. How would you go about measuring their effectiveness? Them, the chefs, the cooks. How would you go about comparing this to other professions?
Measure them?
Yeah, that's right. Let's say we're trying to measure effectiveness. Difficult?
I was thinking maybe we should you can ask other people like when they're gone and like your life satisfaction level, like would it be a big change?
Yeah, good. So I think it's very obvious with doctors, right? Kind of contribution, but maybe we do need to take situations of baseline when they are there and then comparing to when they're not there and then seeing how things are affected. Very, very good. Did you ever have a chance of seeing somebody working a job and then thinking, oh, that person could be a lot more effective in their job if they did something else? Ever happened to you? Yeah. Happens to me quite a lot. You know when? Took me a while to find this comic, but it happens to me a lot when I watch superhero movies. So I don't know how you are with the DC versus Marvel controversy. How many of you are DC people? DC? No DC people. Marvel? Any Marvel people? A little bit. Both? Don't take sides. Both of them. How many of you are both? Some. Okay. Good. So no sides. Mostly Marvel. We don't like this is like of all the Marvel ones. Which ones are like the top ones? Which is the highest impact? No, I just want to evaluate effectiveness. I'll show you. I know he's the most. I could never understand Superman. It's like, what's the deal with Superman? But I saw this comic and I'm like, right on. This is exactly the thing. Because, at the beginning, when they start off, it's kind of like they fight crime. And come on, the guy is an alien. He has superpowers. The best thing that he can do is fight crime. So I saw this comic. Okay, so at the beginning he starts with this, but then came the effective altruists. And instead of stopping criminals, how about you just transport loads of grain to starving people? He's like, okay. And then comes the economists and the physicists. And the new plan, use your strength to plow farmland in impoverished countries. Economists think that that's better for long term. And it's like, but I want to fight crime. Every second of you arguing is another dead baby. And finally, physicists come with the ultimate plan for Superman. Instead of you fighting crime, you just have these superpowers. You can just have a solution for all of us. We need you to crank this magnet as fast as possible. The energy it generates will be so cheap that everybody can enjoy Western standard of living. So just, I think this is brilliant because really you got to wonder when you see all these superheroes doing what they're doing in the movies, like really, is this the best use of their superpowers? There must be something that's more efficient, but I guess that's too much time that I spend with effective altruists. So interesting to think about careers. Benjamin Todd started 80,000 hours, about the same age as you. So very young people in effective altruism, and 80,000 hours is a very effective charity that does a lot of good in the world. They're really interesting in helping folks like you. We're going to do a session. The last session in this course is going to be about career. So I want to try and help you to give you tools to think about your career. So we're going to talk about career choice a lot. In the last session, I'll ask you to share a little bit. I'll share a little bit from my thoughts about career, and then we'll see whether there's a way of you making progress in your career. So it's going to be like a hackathon, hands-on kind of thing. But I want you to meet Benjamin Todd and the 80,000 hours and how they think about career effectiveness. So here's a little bit from him.
Do you want this to happen to you? I got hit 6 times with a 4-5, boy. You won't think you tough? This is what happened to tough.
This is Scared Straight. It was a government program that received billions of dollars of funding and was made into an award-winning documentary.
And the winner is Scared Straight.
The idea was to take kids who committed crimes, show them life inside jail, and scare them onto the straight and narrow. The only problem? It made kids more likely to commit crimes. This was shown by 3 meta-analyses. One study even estimated that every $1 spent on the program caused $200 of harm to society. Now, it turns out that the kids who went through the program did indeed commit fewer crimes afterwards. So everyone involved thought the program was working. But similar kids who didn't go through the program committed even fewer. So the overall effect was to make crime more likely. Hi, I'm Ben from 80,000 Hours. That's our book. And we do research to help people find satisfying careers with positive social impact. One of the questions we're most interested in is the question of what problems to work on. Should we try to reduce juvenile crime or climate change, improve health or education? If lots of approaches to solving these problems just don't work, like Scared Straight, then it could be easy to end up working on an area where we just don't have much impact. So we teamed up with some academics at Oxford and used research by a billion-dollar foundation to come up with an approach you can use to compare different problems you might work on and decide which are highest impact. We came up with 3 key questions to ask yourself, and this video is just a quick summary. First question, is the problem big in scale? The BBC, for instance, forgot to ask themselves this question when they took on this problem. How can we keep Britain's lights on? Unplug your mobile phone charger when it's not in use. People recommend lots of ways to save energy like this, so a Cambridge physics professor, David Mackay, decided to put the problem of phone chargers to the test.
My name's David Mackay. I'm a physicist. I started measuring everything. First, I plugged in a phone charger, and it didn't even register on this power meter.
And then another. And then another, and then another, and then another. Finally, a reading of 0.1 watts. From this, he worked out that if no mobile phone chargers were ever left plugged in ever again, it would save at most 0.01% of Britain's personal energy use. Mackay said it was like trying to bail out the Titanic with a tea strainer. Rather than just promote what intuitively seemed important, if the BBC had done just a basic analysis of the scale of the phone charger problem, they would have realised it just doesn't really matter. Instead, they could have focused on many far more pressing issues, like lack of home insulation. Home insulation cuts personal energy use by about 10%, making it, as an issue, 1,000 times bigger in scale. So the first question to ask yourself is the problem big in scale? And you're probably going to need numbers to help you compare your options, even if they're rough. You can break the question down by asking, if this problem was solved, how many people would be helped? How much would they be helped by? And what would the long-term benefits of solving the problem be? Second question, is the problem neglected? When I was younger, I was most interested in climate change.
We are systematically destroying our land, our streams, and our seas.
Here's a picture of me at a rally. Now, I only ended up getting involved with climate change because lots of people were talking about it, and I found it interesting. And on the scale of things, it is a pretty big issue. But I didn't even consider other big challenges that might be even more neglected.
I rate the chance of a widespread epidemic far worse than Ebola in my lifetime is well over 50%.
When we looked into it, it seemed like pandemics could be a risk on a similar scale to climate change, but they receive under 10% as much funding and far less attention. This really matters due to what economics calls diminishing returns. All else equal, the more people working on a problem, the more the best opportunities will get taken anyway, and the harder it will be for you to make an impact. This actually means that the areas that are popular, those that you might naturally stumble across, are often going to be the lower impact ones. Instead, ask yourself, is the problem neglected? Is it being unfairly overlooked because, say, it affects the world's poorest people? Or it's a low probability event, like a pandemic? Or just few people know about it? Because of this, it may well be that the world's highest impact problem is something you've never even considered working on. Third question, is the problem solvable?
There wouldn't have been a film without the fine work that they are doing in an attempt, and I might add an effective attempt.
It turns out that scared straight is not unusual. David Anderson, an expert in evidence-based policy, estimated that of social programs that have been rigorously evaluated, perhaps 75% or more turn out to produce small or no effects, and in some cases negative effects. This actually means that if you pick a social program to work on without looking at the evidence behind it, then there's a good chance of just having very little impact. Instead, ask yourself, is the problem solvable? Is there an approach to fixing it with rigorous evidence behind it, like how lots of studies show malaria nets prevent malaria? Or maybe you can test out a new but promising approach that might be even more effective. Or maybe you know an approach to solving the problem that has a small chance of working, but if it did, would have a massive impact, like research into a key question or a political campaign. However, if the answer to all of these three questions is no, then it's probably better to find another problem to work on. So that's it. These three questions will help you choose between the problems you encounter and avoid working on something ineffective. You can think of them, scale, neglectedness, and solvability, as 3 dimensions on a graph. You probably won't find opportunities that score brilliantly on all 3, rather look for what does best overall. A problem that's really big and neglected could be worth tackling even if it seems hard to solve. One more thing. There's no point working on a problem in a role that you'll find boring or be bad at. So you also need to consider your chances of success in the area, what we call your personal fit. And it's where your interest in the area comes back in. We cover it and other important factors elsewhere in the Career Guide.
It's not taken for granted that the best, the most effective job for me is to be here with you. It could be that maybe if I'll go and work for 80,000 hours, or if I'll go work for GiveWell or some other charity, I'll do better. So I see my career as fluid. I gain some skills, I meet some people, I have some knowledge, and then I try to implement this in the best possible way by also fulfilling all sorts of other goals that I have, given the best that I can. In almost everything that I give you, I try to think what kind of skills that gives you. So if you look at the 2 projects that we have, the first project is really thinking about charity, how to do an experiment, how to analyze the data, how to look at the literature and find factors and all of that. But if you already had the chance to look at the second one, the second thing that I'm asking you to do in the second project is actually how do we leverage this in order to think about actually building a charity? What would that look like? And I am giving you an example, which we'll talk about in the upcoming weeks, about academics and students, just like you, just like Benjamin Todd, that decided, okay, I can do a lot more good if I go in that direction. We're going to talk about giving multiplier, about Lucius Caviola, together with Joshua Green, an academic who started something by identifying different factors regarding effectiveness, and building a charity that has already tens of millions of dollars that were done in order to do some good in the world. So interesting aspects, things to think about in terms of career. Any questions or thoughts about this before I go on and show you some stats? No? Doctors. So when we try to talk about doctors, how many lives do doctors save during their career? And the first time that I saw this, I'm like, what are they talking about? But you should take into consideration, first of all, it's all doctors. Not all doctors have direct influence over people's lives. You have different types of doctors that do different things. And then there's other considerations. So if you go to their report, how to quantify with Google Sheets, all the evidence that we have, how many lives, they show that on average, for all the careers of doctors, the number of lives is 5. This is their estimate. We can argue about this, we can revisit the data, but this is basically what they're saying. This also takes into consideration that the doctor does usually, let's say they work in a hospital, does not work alone. There's a host of people around them. You have like the nurses and the admins and the bureaucracy and so taking all this into consideration, the contribution that the specific doctor on average has is like 5. So if we said at the beginning the doctors are maybe very high impact, right? One of the highest perhaps we have in society, what could be higher than that? So interesting to see the kind of figures that they have over here. They have another, who has more than 5? Researchers might have. So some of you might think, okay, so I'm in academic environments, academics don't do anything aside from punching the keyboard under fluorescent light in their offices. What does an academic do? What kind of an impact do they have? I don't know that psychologists have this kind of an impact. Remains to be seen. Depends on what kind of psychologist you are, what kind of research you do. But some people, for example, people who develop drugs can have a lot of impact. So this is an outlier, definitely a very extreme outlier. But if you end up discovering a cure for a very common illness, then you'll have a lot of impact on people by the hundreds of thousands. Or if it's an even more bigger problem, then you'll have, by the millions, if you discover something that might impact. I think yesterday or the day before that, somebody received the Nobel Prize for Medicine. Who was that? Yeah, so vaccinations, mRNA, definitely changing the world, has done a lot during the pandemic in order to get us out of this, but also in a host of other things. Right now you have trials for everything, including for the first time a cure or a vaccine against malaria. So it could be that maybe in a decade or two, malaria is not going to be an issue anymore. So all these threats, millions of people affected every year by this, maybe that's the thing of the past. So definitely one person mRNA could be very, very effective. I don't know if you've had a chance to read on this, but there's lots of interesting debates on Blue Sky and Twitter X about this person first being harassed, abused by the system and advisors and all these other things, but also when they submitted their articles to the top journals, they got rejected because it wasn't important, impactful, interesting novel enough. So that goes to show how academia could be a little bit like a head in the wall kind of mentality. Lots of interesting things about this mRNA Nobel Prize. So yeah, congratulations to her. She's going to have a lot of impact, especially if we're talking like if mRNA is the thing that's going to address malaria and all the other illnesses, impact by the billions. So that's really amazing. It takes a village, so it's not just her. There's like a bunch of other people involved in all of this. It takes development over time. It takes maturation. It takes the industry. But just think about the possible. Some people say, so why would I want to be an academic? Sometimes it's worth it if you're doing research that has the potential of being impactful. I try and shift as much as I can from doing, Qualtrics surveys to having something that has more impact. So the thing that I'm trying with you with this first project and second project is building that bridge between how we do research traditionally in social psychology in my lab, and then hopefully something that will have real world implications. If you want to see some of the very detailed reports that 80,000 Hours have on how they measure the impact of a doctor and what is it that the doctors do, they have this measure called DALY, Disability Adjusted Life Years. So when I was asking before, how do we measure the effectiveness of a doctor? How do we know how many lives are saved? Very specific measures that have been developed for that. Then you can kind of like measure diminishing returns on the number of lives affected. So for example, if you're a doctor in Hong Kong, you're definitely doing some good, but you could be a lot more effective if you go where there are no doctors. So Doctors Without Borders, I know my sister and some groups go and volunteer during the time that they have in the summers, going to some remote villages and helping people population. One doctor going to these villages and have never seen a doctor can do a world of good that, is not really needed in Hong Kong, saving a lot of lives. So sometimes it's not just about whether you're a doctor or what type of doctor, but also what kind of location you're at. So you can think about whether you want to increase your visibility. As an academic, I do regret flying a lot, but I do not regret going to places where I think I'm needed more than in Hong Kong. Hong Kong also and me are not aligned in all sorts of things like, open science, but I do try and bring the message to different places in the world. So last year I spent a lot of time in South America and in Africa, trying to promote some of this. The next conference for the Society for Improvement of Psychological Science is actually in Nairobi in Kenya. So I and other people in open science are trying to go there. And I think it's great because usually we run all the conferences just in the US and Western Europe. Rarely we have somebody coming over to Hong Kong. We need to go to the field. This is where we're needed. I know there's a lot of carbon footprint to get all the people over there. So we're also going to do this remote and on Zoom as much as possible. But the lives that we might save through that and the impact that we might have being there in the field and helping where it's most needed, I think is also something to take into consideration. So at least this is how I rationalize and justify things for myself, but I do try and measure this. So I really care about kind of balancing this out and making sure that what I'm doing is effective. So really think about not only the profession that you have, but also where you want to do that profession, what kind of impact you might have. Who are the most highly impacted? Yeah, so you can see all the people that we just talked about. Superman here. So I love this kind of thing that I found him here. What other ways do you have to have an impactful career? You can earn to give. So some people say, I really want to be rich. I don't really care about, going volunteering in Africa. And effective altruism says, yeah, that's completely okay. You can actually do more good if you just take a percentage of your income, 10% of that, and donate this, and then you can hire 1,000 like you that would go to Africa and have a salary in order to do some good. So one approach is definitely earning to give. Some people say, all these people in marketing and communication, they don't do any good. They just spam us and just bombard us with all sorts of things. All these influencers on Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, no good comes out of that. But sometimes being a good communicator, but communicating about the important, effective things can be very, very important. So I see a lot of influencers. Some of them really harass, homeless people and trying to do all sorts of tricks to get more likes. But I do see some of them that really care about altruism and effectiveness and are doing a world of good. So sometimes I'm really for if what you care about is communicating to others, influencing others, helping society, you can be in communications and helping persuade other people to give. Research, if you're into research, there's lots of ways to do this. Even in social psychology, I don't know if coming to this course, you had a good idea of the scope and the scale of where social psychology is at. So us in social psychology, behavioral economists, we go to the field, we care about real impact, we care about the real world. It's not just us running all sorts of experiments in, participant lab pools on things that nobody cares about. We do care about impact. So if you care about this, there's a way for you to be an academic and do that. Some people say, politics, all politicians are useless, but just having one person in a key position in the government, of course, presidents and mayors and, governors and all that, they have a lot of impact, but you can also be a government bureaucrat of some sort where you can do a lot of good, contribute to society and set some policy. If you want to build an organization, you could. So we're going to focus on this in the second task, how to build a charity, how to build an organization. We'll try and get some skills regarding that. So a lot of interesting ideas for you to think about. We had some debates in the last course when I gave this because I wasn't really sure how much, impact possibly HKU students might have. So I was trying to like Google in terms of how privileged are we at HKU. The beginning, I only had this. So HKU graduates continue to achieve full employment for 15 consecutive years with the highest average monthly salary among the local universities. But then after I was told maybe I should look at more sites and information. So this one said that we get the salary of something like $27,956. That's a good salary. But then I looked at some other more, let's say, objective measures that are not HKU. And then I said, okay, maybe not that much. It's almost like half, 16,000 a month. But the good thing about HKU graduates is that they increase their salary very fast. So maybe at the beginning you're an intern, but then you get to like the full profession, and then it can double, triple, quad, and so forth. So it increases and then it averages together with the rest of the Hong Kong population. So we have the capacity to do good both in our careers and what it is that we do, but we also have the capacity to give a little bit of our income if we want to, no pressure whatsoever. But this is some of the things that some people are thinking about. Some people are saying, but I don't have anything right now to give. That's completely okay. Sometimes people make pledges. When I hit, I don't know, $80,000 a month, then I will give 10%. So you can make a pledge for now, you can make a pledge for later. But it's interesting to see where we are in terms of the population, how we are compared to other universities. So you can have both a high career, high impact career choice, or you can have earning to give. So you can do this through your salary. So say, I don't want to bother with effectiveness. I really care about my passion. I'm very passionate about, I don't know, music, or I'm very passionate about whatever it is that you do as a hobby, and I want to pursue that. That's terrific. Then perhaps you can find some other ways to contribute through some other means like donations or influencing others. Just to summarize how we're doing, okay. We talked about all sorts of different cognitive biases in the way that people do charitable giving. So coming back to donations, this is one of the main websites. This is where you can find 1.5 million charities to look at. And then we already know that people try to minimize overhead. Mannix did one of his extensions on this, and I think Barron also included this in their 5 factors in the Target article that you're looking at. I just wanted to show you some examples for that. Typically, what people think about when they think about overhead is like, oh, we're paying overhead for the salary so that the CEO of the charity can have massages. This is not usually the case, because many times when we invest in overhead, we're investing in better administration, not always, but sometimes better administration, making sure that there's higher transparency and that somebody is working to really measure and learn how to improve. So I just wanted to show you before we wrap up this very interesting article. And this is one of the insights that led to some good charities coming out in trying to balance out how to help people make more effective donations. So this could be helpful for you in your project in how to think about these things. So Uri Genizi, together with Gilad Genizi, they're a couple, and another co-author, published this in Science. So it's not often that social psychologists or behavioral economists publish in something like Science. So this is quite unusual. And it is because they did some good experiments with field data. And what they were saying is what we now already know, and we've seen this, is that we really don't like overhead. So people really try and avoid overhead. So they were thinking how to avoid this problem, how to overcome people not wanting to invest in overhead. So they gave a bunch of options, and one of the options was you donate to a charity that has high overhead, but the overhead is covered by a big donor. So for example, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, they care about effectiveness, they care about science, so we can convince them to take care of the overhead so that nobody else has to make their donations to contribute to that overhead. So you can tell people there is overhead, but it's taken care of by these big donors. What you will donate actually will go to the charity. So you can see the different kind of, maybe I'll just zoom on this because it's a little bit small. All right, so it's this one over here. And what you can see here is that when it's not covered, the overhead level really decreased the donation. So you can see from something like, I don't know, 70% decreased to 0.50. So this is a large decrease. But when it was covered, so if the overhead is covered by some rich person, then actually there's not a lot of impact on whether, overhead, if it's higher or lower, it doesn't have a lot of impact on that. What else did I want to show you? Oh, yeah. So this point, this paper here, is that typically I like papers in Science and Nature, but I'm also very skeptical because I don't know if you've ever read a Science and Nature paper. They don't have a lot of details. It's very, very short. They don't share a lot. And it's overhyped. It's to make a lot of noise. So I will only share something with you from Science and Nature if I've seen a replication of this. And one of the amazing things that has been happening because of the open science movement is since 2014-15, we've been doing a lot of replications. Behavioral economists also took this to heart. And so together in this mass collaboration, you can see here, behavioral economists and social psychologists looked at all the papers published in Nature and Science that had to do with social sciences. So Science and Nature does a lot with, from physics, biology, chemistry, like whatever you want. They took the ones that have social psychology, and there's not a lot. This is one of them. And they did a replication. And what you can see over here is that they reran one of the experiments in this article, in this Science article. I'm gonna bring this up. Yeah. So this is the one here. So this is the Genesi. They ran this replication, and what they found was that there was support for this effect size. So not only did the Genesi couple do well in their science and some very interesting field data, but also when the experiments that they ran over there seem to replicate quite well. And then after I saw this, I thought, okay, so this is terrific. Now we can incorporate this also in our charity comparisons. So as you saw in Manix's thesis, we also had not just whether the charity has overhead, yes or no, but also whether the overhead is paid for by somebody else. And we were able to show some support for that. So we did a conceptual replication, not exactly what the Genesi couple did, but we did a conceptual replication of that. So if you see something in the literature that speaks to you, especially if it was something that is impactful and you want to test this again in your first task, I'm very open to that. So it would be something interesting for us to see if that works or not, and to overcome some of the cognitive biases. So we can show that if people focus on overhead, if it's paid for by somebody else, they actually don't care about that as much, and they contribute more. So some ideas for you to think about for your task. Just wanted to share this with you as something for your task as you're thinking about this. Next week, not a must. It's completely up to you. Tutorials are to assist you. You don't have to come if you don't want to, but we'll do a tutorial next week. We'll make an announcement about this. So if you want to meet Lily and Christy and talk to them about things, you're very welcome to next week. If you want to discuss stuff with me, I'm very grateful for the 2 groups that ask me questions about this. Please ask me questions on Slack, and we'll try to be responsive. If there's something that's not clear, something that you need help on, you're not sure this idea is good or this idea is good. We have so many ideas. Which one do you think is better? Talk to me. Yeah, I want to help you be more effective and to find more cool things that we can check out together. So just let me know. Okay. Any questions about today's session, about anything regarding this course, something you want to talk about, some thoughts? All good? Yeah? Great. So I'll see you next week. Thanks.